She thinks I saved her.
He whispered it into his phone. Thought she was asleep. She wasn't.
Delete the hospital records. All of them.
She lay frozen, eyes closed, breathing slow. Her mother never woke up after we moved her to Seoul. Seoul? Her mother died in London. That's what they told her. The accident was clean, no witnesses. Her nails dug into the sheets.
She's grateful. Has no idea she's sleeping next to the man who killed her mother.
The phone slipped in her palm, still recording. 3 months of recordings, every confession, every call. And tonight, he just gave her everything she needed.
She spent 3 months perfecting the art of looking unconscious. That's not marriage, that's survival training.
Velara Stories is where we watch people become whoever they need to be to make it out alive.
4 months earlier, Rosalie had never heard of Gwon Tae-il. She was sitting in a coffee shop in London, staring at hospital bills she couldn't pay, when a lawyer slid into the seat across from her. "Miss Kingsley," he'd said, "I represent a client in Seoul who wishes to make you an offer." The offer was simple: marriage, 1 year minimum, full debt forgiveness, a monthly allowance that made her stomach turn, no love, no expectations beyond public appearances. "Why me?" she'd asked. The lawyer had smiled. "You fit the profile." She didn't ask what that meant. 2 weeks later, she was on a plane to South Korea. The media lost their minds. Gwon Tae-il, the youngest billionaire tech chairman in the country, known for his ice-cold business deals and refusal to date publicly, was marrying a foreigner. A black woman. The tabloids called her a gold digger. His board called her a liability. The comments section called her worse. Tae-il said nothing. Their wedding was small, private, held in a hotel ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. There were photographers but no guests, just lawyers and witnesses. Rosalie wore a dress someone else had picked. Tae-il wore a suit that probably cost more than her entire education. When it was time for vows, she went first. "I promise to stand by you," she said quietly. Her hands were shaking. "No matter what happens, I'll stay." Tae-il looked at her. His face was blank. "You will live comfortably," he said. "You will not interfere in my life." That was it. No "I do," no kiss, just a contract spoken aloud. The officiant looked uncomfortable. "You may now." "We're done here," Tae-il said. But Rosalie wasn't done. That night in the penthouse that was now supposedly theirs, she found him standing by the windows. His jacket was off, his tie loosened. He looked almost human. "You know," she said, stepping closer, "most grooms at least pretend to be happy on their wedding night." He didn't turn around. "I'm not most grooms." "I noticed." She moved beside him. The city stretched out below them, endless lights flickering like trapped stars. "You don't have to be so cold," she said softly. "I know this isn't real, but we could at least be civil." He finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "This is civil." Rosalie smiled, not because she was happy, because she didn't know what else to do. "Then let me try something," she said. She leaned up and kissed him. It was brief, barely a brush of lips. He didn't pull away, but he didn't respond either. When she stepped back, his expression hadn't changed. "There," she said, "now we're actually married." Tae-il turned back to the window. "Go to bed, Rosalie." She did. And she lay there alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man could be so empty inside. She didn't know then that empty wasn't the problem. The problem was what he was hiding in that emptiness. The first month of marriage was a performance. Tae-il played the role of devoted husband in public. He held her hand at charity galas, smiled for cameras, introduced her to investors as "my wife," with a warmth that evaporated the second they were alone. In private, he barely looked at her. He worked 18-hour days, came home late, ate dinner in his office, slept in the guest room more nights than not. Rosalie told herself it was better this way, easier. But the penthouse felt like a museum, beautiful and untouchable. Staff moved through the halls like ghosts, always polite, always distant. When she tried to enter certain rooms, she found them locked. When she asked why, she was told, Mr. Gwyn's private offices. The phone started ringing at night, around the third week. Always after 11 p.m. Always in his office or the closet. Always in Korean, spoken too quietly for her to catch more than fragments. She tried not to care. Then she found the hospital bill. It was an accident. She'd been looking for aspirin in his desk drawer and found a folder buried beneath old contracts. The bill was dated 3 months before their wedding, for a private medical facility in Seoul. The patient name was redacted, but the service wasn't. Emergency cremation. Rosalie's mother had died 4 months before the wedding. In London, that's what she'd been told, a sudden illness, complications. But this bill was from Seoul. She closed the drawer and walked out of the office. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was a coincidence. It had to be. That night she couldn't sleep. So she lay still and listened. And that's when everything changed. 11:52 p.m. Teal's voice drifted through the closet door, quiet, cold. "I told you she's harmless," he said in Korean. "The foreign wife doesn't ask questions. She's grateful." Rosalie's breath caught. "Grateful. She thinks I saved her," he continued. "She doesn't know the accident was intentional, or that her mother never woke up after we moved her to the facility here." The room tilted. Moved her here. Her mother hadn't died in London. She died here, in Seoul, in a hospital bill Rosalie had just found hidden in his desk. "Delete the records," Teal said. "All of them. I don't want any trace left." Rosalie's vision blurred. She pressed her face deeper into the pillow. Her body was shaking now, but she forced it still, forced her breathing to stay even. He stepped out of the closet, crossed back to the bed, lay down beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight. She felt him turn toward her, watching again. Then he rolled over and closed his eyes. Rosalie stared into the darkness and made a decision. "I will never sleep again." The decision settled in her chest like ice water. Rosalie lay in the dark, listening to Teal's breathing even out beside her. He thought she was asleep. He always thought she was asleep. She'd spent 3 months playing the role of grateful foreign wife, smiling at galas, wearing the right dresses, keeping her mouth shut. That ended tonight. Her mother hadn't died of an illness in London. She'd been moved to Seoul, to a private facility, and Gwyn Teal had paid for her cremation. The man lying 18 inches away from her had murdered her mother. And he thought Rosalie didn't know. She waited until his breathing deepened. Then she counted to 300, 5 full minutes. Only then did she allow herself to move, slowly, carefully, reaching for her phone beneath the pillow. Her hands were shaking. She opened the Notes app and typed in the dark. Screen brightness turned all the way down. Hospital records, cremation bill, Seoul facility. Mother moved here, he knows. She saved it, locked the phone, slid it back under the pillow. Then she lay perfectly still again and began training herself to become invisible. It took 2 weeks to master the breathing. In through the nose for 4 seconds, hold for 7, out through the mouth for 8, slow enough to look like deep sleep, controlled enough that her chest barely moved. She practiced during the day when Teal was at work, lying on the bed with a hand mirror angled above her face, watching for any flicker in her eyelids, any tension in her jaw. The first few nights, her heart raced so fast she thought he'd hear it. But he never did. By the 3rd week, she could lie motionless for an hour without cramping. By the fourth, she learned to slow her pulse by counting backward from 100. The insomnia was harder. She functioned on 3 hours of sleep, stolen in the early morning after Teal left for his office. Her body screamed for rest. Her mind stayed wired. Coffee helped. Fear helped more. Every night at 11:47 p.m. the performance began. She'd lie on her side with her phone in hand, exactly how he expected. He'd glance at her, pause, then move to the closet or the hallway or sometimes his office down the hall. And every night she listened. She kept a notebook hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice on the bookshelf, the kind of book a foreigner might read, the kind Teal would never touch. In it she wrote everything. Names, dates, code words. Project Swan mentioned 4 times, financial transfer, medical. The second phase starts in June 14th call. Woman's voice on speaker, he's asking questions about the shipment, response, then stop him from asking. The more she wrote, the less she understood. Teal wasn't just a tech billionaire. He was running something else, something that required late-night calls in 3 languages, something that made people disappear when they asked too many questions. And Rosalie was living in his house, sleeping in his bed, pretending to be harmless. The conversations followed patterns. Mondays were financial, wire transfers to offshore accounts, instructions to accountants in Singapore and Switzerland, numbers that made her head spin. Move $8 million to the Cayman account, he'd say. Backdate the invoice to March. Tuesdays and Thursdays were operational. Project Swan is delayed. The medical clearances aren't coming through. Then pay whoever needs to be paid. It's not about money. The ethics board is asking questions. Replace the ethics board. Fridays were the worst. That's when the women called. Rosalie heard their voices through the phone speaker when he got careless, flirty, warm, calling him Opa and asking when he'd visit. He never promised them anything, just said soon. She told herself it didn't matter. This wasn't a real marriage. He could do what he wanted. But it still felt like acid in her chest. Then there were the political calls. Ministers, prosecutors, city officials. Teal spoke to them like he owned them. Maybe he did. The investigation into the facility will be dropped by Monday, he'd say. I've made sure of it. What about the reporter? Handled. How? Does it matter? Silence on the other end. Then, no, I suppose it doesn't. Rosalie wrote it all down, every name, every word she caught. She didn't know what Project Swan was yet, but she knew people died because of it. It happened on a Wednesday night, week 7 of her pretending. Teal's voice came from the closet, quieter than usual. You're sure the driver was never identified? He asked. Rosalie's entire body went rigid. Good, and the hospital in London confirmed she collapsed there first. Her mother. He was talking about her mother. I don't care what the family believes, Teal continued. The official record says she died in London. The cremation in Seoul was never documented. There's no connection. Rosalie's fingernails dug into the sheets. She never woke up after the transfer, he said. The coma lasted 3 days. We pulled support on the 4th. We pulled support. Her vision blurred. No, the daughter doesn't know. She thinks it was natural, a stroke or something. He paused. She's grateful I paid off her debts. Grateful I married her. She has no idea she's sleeping next to the man who killed her mother. Rosalie bit down on the pillow. Hard. She tasted copper, blood from where her teeth broke the skin inside her lip. Her whole body was shaking now. She pressed her face deeper into the fabric, trying to muffle the sound of her breathing. Don't move, don't scream, don't let him know. Teal finished the call. She heard him set the phone down, heard him walk back to the bed. He stood there, looking at her. She kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing even, felt the blood pooling warm against her lip. Then he lay down beside her and went to sleep. Like he hadn't just confessed to murder. Like she was nothing. Rosalie waited 2 hours. When she was sure Teal was asleep, she slipped out of bed and locked herself in the bathroom. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely turn on the faucet. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her lip was swollen. Blood had dried in the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were red but dry. She hadn't cried, couldn't cry. Crying was for people who had the luxury of grief. She had work to do. She turned on the shower to cover the sound, and sat on the cold tile floor with her knees pulled to her chest. Her mother's face filled her mind, the hospital room in London, the machines, the way her hand had felt so small when Rosalie held it. "I'm sorry," the doctor had said. "The stroke was massive. There was nothing we could do." Except it wasn't a stroke. It was Gwen Teal. Rosalie pressed her fists against her mouth and rocked forward. She wanted to scream, wanted to storm into the bedroom and claw his eyes out, wanted to call the police, the press, anyone who would listen. But she didn't. Because Rosalie Kingsley wasn't who Teal thought she was. And it was time to stop pretending she was. Her real name wasn't Rosalie Kingsley. It was Rosalie Armitage Kingsley, daughter of High Court Judge Marcus Armitage, one of Britain's most respected investigative judges specializing in international financial crimes. She'd grown up watching her father dismantle criminal empires from the witness stand. She'd studied economics and forensic accounting at Cambridge. She'd spent 2 years working with Interpol's Financial Intelligence Unit before her mother got sick. When her mother died, Rosalie had done what her father taught her. She followed the money. The hospital bills didn't add up. The insurance claim was rejected for reasons that made no sense. The death certificate listed a London address, but the cremation happened somewhere else. Someone had paid to move her mother. Someone had paid to keep it quiet. The trail led to Seoul, to a network of private medical facilities with ties to corporate money, to shell companies and offshore accounts, and eventually to Gwen Teal. She changed her name, scrubbed her background, created a fake identity as a struggling art conservator with debt, made herself exactly the kind of woman a man like Teal would never see as a threat. Then she'd waited for him to notice her. It took 3 months, a charity gala in London. She'd positioned herself near the donor wall studying a painting. He'd walked past. She'd made sure to stumble. He'd caught her. "Careful," he'd said. "Sorry, I wasn't paying attention." He'd looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, then walked away. 2 weeks later, his lawyer called with an offer. She'd accepted. Because she needed to get inside his world, needed access to his files, his networks, his secrets. She just hadn't expected the truth to be this close. This intimate. This monstrous. Rosalie stood up from the bathroom floor and wiped her face. She turned off the shower and stared at herself in the mirror again. "You wanted to know who killed your mother," she whispered. "Now you know." The woman staring back at her looked different now, harder, colder. Good. She needed to be cold for what came next. The next morning, Rosalie waited until Teal left for work. Then she went into his office. His laptop was password protected, but she'd watched him type it in enough times to guess it. His mother's birthday followed by the company's founding year. She was in. The files were organized meticulously. Financial records, contracts, investor reports. And buried in a folder labeled Medical Ventures was Project Swan. She opened it. Her stomach dropped. Project Swan wasn't a tech initiative. It was a network of private medical facilities across Asia conducting unlicensed clinical trials, testing experimental drugs on patients who couldn't consent, using falsified medical records to cover deaths. Her mother had been one of them. Transferred to Seoul under a fake diagnosis, enrolled in a trial for a neurological drug that hadn't passed safety testing. She died from complications, and Teal had paid to erase every record. Rosalie's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents. There were others, dozens of them, names redacted, causes of death listed as natural. She plugged in a USB drive and started copying everything. Financial statements, email correspondence, facility location, lists of doctors involved. It took 40 minutes. When she was done, she cleared the browser history, shut down the laptop, and returned everything to exactly how she'd found it. Then she went back to the bedroom and hid the drive inside the hollowed-out book. That night, she uploaded everything to a secure cloud server her father had set up years ago for exactly this kind of situation. Her insurance. 2 nights later, Teal took a call in the closet at 11:52 p.m. "She's asking about her mother's death," he said quietly. Rosalie's blood turned to ice. Nothing direct, just questions about the cremation, why it happened so fast, why she wasn't allowed to see the body. A pause. "I don't think she suspects me, but she's not as stupid as I thought." Rosalie's heart hammered. "If it becomes a problem," Teal's voice dropped lower, "if she starts digging too deep or talking to the wrong people, we'll handle it the same way." Another pause. "A suicide makes sense. Foreign wife, isolated, depressed. No one would question it." Rosalie stopped breathing. "Set it up as a contingency," Teal said. "I don't want to use it unless necessary, but if she becomes a liability, I need options." He ended the call. Rosalie lay frozen in the dark. He was planning to kill her. Not someday, not if things went wrong. He already had a plan in place, waiting, ready to execute the moment she became inconvenient. The man who murdered her mother was now preparing to murder her. And he thought she had no idea. Rosalie waited until his breathing deepened. Then she opened her eyes in the darkness. She turned her head slowly, just enough to see his face in the dim glow from the city lights. Gwon Teal, tech genius, billionaire murderer. He looked peaceful when he slept, almost human. Almost. She studied the line of his jaw, the way his hand rested on the pillow, the slow rise and fall of his chest. He thought he was untouchable, thought she was powerless, thought he could erase her the same way he'd erased her mother, with a phone call and some falsified paperwork. Rosalie's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She turned her face back into the pillow and closed her eyes. But this time, her mind wasn't racing with fear. It was calculating. Evidence secured, cloud backup complete, timeline documented, witnesses identified. And one more thing she'd learned from her father: ghosts don't need to sleep. They just need to wait for the right moment to haunt you. "Then I will become your ghost before you kill me," she thought. And in the darkness, Rosalie Armitage Kingsley began planning her husband's destruction. 3 weeks. That's how long Rosalie spent playing the perfect wife while planning her husband's downfall. During the day, she smiled at the staff, attended gallery openings, wore the dresses his stylist picked out, let photographers capture her holding Teal's hand at corporate events. At night, she lay perfectly still and gathered evidence. She'd copied financial records showing illegal medical trials across 5 countries, email chains discussing patient deaths and falsified autopsy reports, wire transfer receipts to government officials, communications between Teal and facility directors about disposing of complications. Everything was backed up, encrypted, stored on servers he'd never find. She had enough to destroy him. But she needed one more thing. A way out. Because the moment she went public with the evidence, Teal would know she'd been lying all along, that she was awake every night, that she'd heard everything. and then she'd become the liability he'd already planned to eliminate. Rosalie needed to disappear before that happened, needed to die before he could kill her. She just needed the right moment. Teal gave it to her on a Friday. "There's a charity gala next week," he said over breakfast. He didn't look up from his tablet. "Cancer research. You'll attend with me." Rosalie sipped her coffee. "Of course. The media will be there. International press. I need you to look devoted." He glanced at her. Something flickered in his eyes. "Convincing." She smiled. "I'm always convincing." He went back to his tablet. Rosalie set down her coffee cup and felt the trap closing. This was it. Whatever he was planning, it would happen at the gala. The ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. White orchids spilled from gold vases on every table. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns that cost more than cars. Camera flashes from the press line outside. Seoul's elite gathered to pretend they cared about cancer research. Rosalie wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her figure, diamonds at her throat on loan from Teal's collection, hair swept up, makeup perfect. She looked like exactly what she was supposed to be. A trophy. Teal stood beside her on the red carpet, hand resting lightly on her lower back. He smiled for the cameras, leaned in close like he was whispering something intimate. "Don't embarrass me tonight," he said quietly in English. "Wouldn't dream of it," she replied. Inside the ballroom, they made the rounds. Teal introduced her to board members, investors, politicians, men who looked at her like an expensive accessory, women who looked at her like a mistake. "My wife," Teal would say, pulling her close. "Rosalie, she's been such a light in my life." His voice was warm, affectionate, completely fake. But the media ate it up. One reporter asked, "Mr. Gwon, you've always been so private. What changed?" Teal looked at Rosalie. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "She did," he said. "Sometimes you meet someone who reminds you what matters. Rosalie is my angel." The cameras loved it. Rosalie wanted to throw up. They moved to their table. Dinner was served. Champagne flowed. Speeches began about cancer survival rates and research funding. Rosalie barely heard any of it. She was watching the waiters, particularly the one who kept glancing at Teal, the one who refilled her wine glass twice while everyone else got champagne. The wine tasted fine, slightly bitter, but red wine was always bitter. She drank it anyway, because if this was the move, she needed to know. 20 minutes later, the room started tilting. Rosalie blinked. The chandeliers blurred. Voices around her sounded muffled like she was underwater. She set down her fork. "Are you all right?" someone asked. A woman across the table, concern in her voice. "I'm fine," Rosalie said. Her tongue felt thick, just warm. She reached for her water glass. Missed. The glass tipped over, water spreading across the white tablecloth. "Oh my God," someone said. Teal was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder. "Rosalie." She looked up at him. His face swam in and out of focus. He wasn't concerned. He was waiting. "I don't feel," she started. Then her vision went dark at the edges. She felt herself falling, felt hands catching her, heard voices shouting for a doctor. But through it all she saw Teal's face. Calm, expressionless, watching her collapse like it was a quarterly earnings report. Then everything went black. Rosalie woke to white walls and the smell of disinfectant. A private hospital room, machines beeping softly, IV in her arm. Her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. She tried to sit up. A nurse appeared immediately. "Mrs. Gwon, please don't move. You need rest." "What happened?" "You collapsed at the gala. The doctors are running tests." Rosalie's hand went to her pocket. "Empty. Where's my phone?" Your husband has it for safekeeping. Ice flooded her veins. I need it back. I'll let him know you're awake. The nurse left before Rosalie could say anything else. She looked around the room. No windows, one door. She could hear voices outside, men's voices. Guards. Her heart started racing. This wasn't a hospital, it was a cage. She tried to get out of bed. The IV pulled tight. She yanked it out, ignoring the sharp sting. She made it 3 steps before the door opened. Teal walked in, suit perfectly pressed, face perfectly calm. You're awake, he said. Good. Where's my phone? Safe. Give it back. You're not well, Rosalie. The doctors say you've been under tremendous stress. They found traces of anti-anxiety medication in your system. She stared at him. I don't take anti-anxiety medication. Apparently you do, you just don't remember. He moved closer. It's concerning. The psychiatric evaluation suggests you may be suffering from a dissociative disorder. Rosalie's blood went cold. What? Delusions, paranoia, memory gaps, classic symptoms. His voice was so calm, so reasonable. The doctors recommend extended observation, maybe a month, maybe longer. You drugged me. The wine was tested, clean. You're lying. He smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. Who do you think they'll believe, Rosalie? A respected billionaire, or a foreign wife with a history of emotional instability? She lunged at him. 2 orderlies appeared from nowhere, grabbing her arms. She fought, but they were too strong. Sedate her, Teal said quietly. She's a danger to herself. No. A needle pierced her arm. The room spun again. The last thing she saw was Teal watching her with that same empty expression. Then darkness. When Rosalie woke again, Teal was sitting in a chair beside her bed. Alone this time. You're smarter than I thought, he said conversationally. I didn't realize it at first. You played the grateful wife so well. Rosalie's head was clearer now, but her body felt heavy. Whatever they'd given her was still in her system. When did you figure it out? She asked. Her voice was hoarse. 3 weeks ago. I came back to the bedroom early and saw your eyes move beneath your lids. You were awake. You'd been awake for a while. Her stomach dropped. He'd known. I started testing you, he continued. Saying things to see if you'd react. You never did, impressive control, but you made a mistake. What mistake? You looked at my laptop. You were careful but not careful enough. I track access remotely. He leaned forward. I know you copied the Project Swan files. I know you uploaded them somewhere. Rosalie's heart stopped. Where's the backup? He asked. I don't know what you're talking about. Rosalie, don't insult both of us. His voice dropped. You came to Seoul looking for answers about your mother. You changed your name, created a fake identity, married me to get close. Very clever. She said nothing. But here's what you don't understand, Teal said softly. I let you do it. I knew who you were from the beginning. Daughter of Marcus Armitage, forensic accountant, Interpol consultant. Did you really think I wouldn't run a background check? The room tilted again. I needed you to believe you were winning, he continued. Needed you to feel safe enough to show me where you'd hide evidence. And you did. That flash drive in your book, the cloud server with your father's encryption, all monitored. No. No. The files you copied were modified, Teal said. Fake records, altered dates, nothing that would hold up in court. The real files are somewhere you'll never find them. Rosalie felt tears burning her eyes. You have nothing, he said. No evidence, no backup, no escape. Your phone is wiped, your contacts deleted. The staff who might have helped you have been reassigned. You're completely alone. She turned her face away. This isn't personal, Teal said. His voice was almost gentle. You were a problem I needed to contain, that's all. You killed my mother. I made a business decision. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, enrolled in a trial that had complications. These things happen. You murdered her. I ended a project that was no longer profitable. He stood. And now I'm ending this. You'll stay here for psychiatric treatment. Eventually, you'll be released. You'll go back to London with a very generous settlement and a very tight NDA, and you'll never speak about Project Swan or your mother or any of this again. Rosalie looked at him, and if I refuse? Teal walked to the door, then paused. Then you'll suffer the same unfortunate accident your mother did. A tragedy, but these things happen. He left. The door locked behind him. Rosalie lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling. He'd won. He'd actually won. What Teal didn't know was that Rosalie Armitage Kingsley had been trained by one of the most paranoid investigative judges in Britain. Marcus Armitage didn't trust technology, didn't trust encrypted servers. He trusted people. 3 days before the gala, Rosalie had met someone in a coffee shop across from the penthouse. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes who ordered tea and sat by the window. Her name was Margaret Chen, former MI6, current investigative journalist, old friend of her father's. Rosalie had given her a physical drive, the real one, copied from Teal's laptop before he knew she was watching him. If anything happens to me, Rosalie had said, you know what to do. Margaret had nodded. How will I know? You'll know. Now, lying in the hospital bed, Rosalie closed her eyes and sent a mental message she hoped somehow reached Margaret. It's time. 2 days later, Rosalie watched the orderly bring her evening medication. But this time, the pills looked different. New prescription, the orderly said, then quieter from a friend. Rosalie looked up. The orderly was young, Korean, scared. Who? Rosalie whispered. I was told to say, your father sends his regards. Margaret. Rosalie took the pills, but she didn't swallow them. She hid them under her tongue until the orderly left. Then she spat them into her hand. One pill was red, the other was a tiny USB drive. She plugged it into the disabled tablet they'd given her for entertainment. A message appeared, extraction in 48 hours, play along. Play along meant looking broken. So Rosalie stopped fighting, stopped asking for her phone, started crying during therapy sessions, talked about how stressed she'd been, how grateful she was for Teal's support. She became exactly what they wanted to see. A broken wife. On the third night, the fire alarm went off. In the chaos of evacuation, a nurse grabbed Rosalie's arm and pulled her toward a service exit instead of the main doors. This way, the nurse said in perfect English. They ran down 3 flights of stairs, into a basement, through a service tunnel. A van was waiting. Margaret was in the driver's seat. Get in. Rosalie climbed in. The doors slammed shut. The van pulled away. Where are we going? Rosalie asked. Somewhere he'll never look, Margaret said. We have 48 hours before he realizes you're gone. We need to stage your death. How? Margaret handed her a phone. On the screen was a photo of a woman who looked enough like Rosalie to pass in low light. Suicide, Margaret said grimly. Jumped from the hospital roof, body recovered, closed casket. Your husband will make sure there's no autopsy. Rosalie stared at the photo. Who is she? A Jane Doe from the morgue, car accident victim, same age, same build, no family. He'll check. He'll check what his people tell him to check, and his people are expensive, but mine are more loyal. Margaret glanced at her. Your father trained you for this. Time to see if you remember the lessons. Rosalie looked out the window at Seoul, disappearing behind them. Then let's make him believe I'm dead. The news broke the next morning. Tragic death at private medical facility. Rosalie Gwon, wife of tech billionaire Gwon Teal, found dead after apparent suicide. Hospital staff report she'd been receiving psychiatric treatment for depression. The photos showed a body bag, a hospital roof, police tape. Teal watched the coverage from his office. His assistant knocked. "Sir, the police are requesting a statement." "Tell them I'm devastated. My wife had been struggling. I tried to get her help. It wasn't enough." "And the funeral?" "Private closed casket, immediate cremation. Donations in her name. To mental health charities. Make sure the press knows." The assistant left. Teal turned back to the window, Seoul stretched out below him, endless, controlled. One problem eliminated. He almost smiled. Then his phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. He opened it. The message contained a single sentence and a photo. "Suicide looks different when the body's still breathing." The photo showed Rosalie, very much alive, standing in front of a location he didn't recognize, holding today's newspaper. And beneath the photo, another message. "See you in Singapore, husband. I hope you've practiced your apology." Teal's hand tightened on his phone. The screen cracked, but his face stayed perfectly calm as he stared at the photo of his very alive, very angry wife. And for the first time in his life, Teal felt something he'd never experienced before. Fear. Teal stared at the photo for 3 full minutes. Rosalie, alive, holding today's newspaper with a headline about her own funeral. His mind worked through the possibilities. Fake death, body substitution, inside help, someone on his payroll had betrayed him. He made 7 phone calls in the next hour. To the hospital director, the crematorium, the police officer who'd signed off on the suicide report, the nurse who'd discovered the body, the coroner who'd processed the remains. Every single one confirmed the same story. Rosalie Gwon had jumped from the hospital roof, body recovered, identified by hospital staff, cremated within 48 hours per family request. Except there was no family. And no body. Teal sat in his office as the sun set over Seoul and realized he'd made his first real mistake. He'd underestimated her. The phone in his hand buzzed again, same unknown number. 3 months, Singapore, don't be late. He deleted the message. Then he called his head of security. "Find her," he said. "I don't care what it costs." But 3 months later, when Teal walked into that Singapore conference room, he still hadn't found her. And Rosalie was counting on that. By November, Teal had become untouchable. His company's stock had climbed 40%. Project Swan had quietly rebranded as a legitimate medical research initiative with government backing. New partnerships with pharmaceutical companies in Germany and Japan. He'd been photographed with ministers, ambassadors, and the kind of people whose names didn't appear in public records. The media had mostly stopped talking about his dead wife. When they did mention her, it was in sympathetic tones. The tragic foreign bride who couldn't handle the pressure of marrying into Korea's elite. Some outlets even called him a victim. Teal had started attending social events again. The whispers about engagement had begun. A suitable match this time, someone from a proper family, someone who understood how things worked. He looked like a man who'd survived grief and come out stronger. In reality, he was a man who slept with a gun under his pillow and jumped at every unknown number. Because somewhere out there, his dead wife was waiting. The Singapore shareholder meeting was supposed to be his coronation. Expansion into Southeast Asian markets. A $50 billion deal that would make his company the largest medical tech conglomerate in Asia. Investors from 12 countries. Media coverage from every major financial outlet. It was scheduled for November 14th at the Raffles City Convention Center. Teal flew in the night before, stayed at the presidential suite of the Marina Bay Sands, reviewed his presentation 17 times. Everything was perfect. He walked into that conference room at exactly 9:00 a.m., confident that whatever game Rosalie was playing, she'd missed her chance. 3 months was a long time to hide, long enough to lose momentum, long enough for evidence to decay and witnesses to forget. He took his place at the head of the table, 200 people in the room, investors, board members, analysts, cameras from Bloomberg and Reuters. "Good morning," he said in English. His accent was barely noticeable. "Thank you all for being here. Today marks a historic moment for our company and for the future of medical innovation in Asia." He clicked to the first slide. The doors at the back of the room opened. Teal glanced up reflexively, and his heart stopped. Rosalie walked in. She wore a white suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry, no makeup beyond what was necessary. She looked like a woman who'd returned from death with a singular purpose. The room went silent. Heads turned, whispers started, someone gasped. Teal's hand froze on the remote. Rosalie walked down the center aisle. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Every step echoed in the massive space. She didn't look at anyone except him. When she reached the front, she stopped 3 feet from the table. "Hello, Teal," she said, her voice carried in the silence. "I hope I'm not late." Someone in the back shouted, "That's Gwyn's dead wife." Cameras swung toward her. Teal's face had gone pale, but his voice stayed steady. "Rosalie, you're alive." "I am." "Where have you been?" "Waiting." She pulled a small USB drive from her pocket and placed it on the conference table. "For the right moment to introduce your shareholders to the real Gwyn Teal." A board member leaned forward. "Mrs. Gwyn, we were told you died. How is this possible?" "I faked my death," Rosalie said simply, "because my husband was planning to kill me, and I needed time to gather evidence before he could." Teal's jaw tightened. "This is insane. She's clearly unwell. Security." "Before you call security," Rosalie interrupted, "you should know that drive contains 3 months of recorded phone conversations, financial records from 17 offshore accounts, medical files from facilities in 5 countries, and video footage of meetings between your CEO and government officials discussing how to cover up patient deaths." The room erupted. Investors shouting, board members standing, camera operators pushing forward. "This is absurd," Teal started. Rosalie plugged the drive into the main presentation screen. The display changed. Audio played first. Teal's voice, crystal clear, speaking in Korean with English subtitles appearing on screen. "She thinks I saved her. She doesn't know the accident was intentional, or that her mother never woke up after we moved her to the facility here." The room went deadly quiet. "Delete the records, all of them. I don't want any trace left." Then another clip. "If she becomes a problem, we handle it the same way. A suicide makes sense. Foreign wife, isolated, depressed. No one would question it." Rosalie stood motionless as her husband's voice confessed to murder and conspiracy in front of 200 witnesses. The audio was just the beginning. Financial records appeared next. Wire transfers, shell company structures, payments to government officials with timestamps and bank receipts. Then medical files. Patient names redacted but causes of death listed. Natural causes over and over again, except the internal notes told a different story. Subject 23, adverse reaction to experimental compound, respiratory failure, body disposed of per protocol. Subject 47, severe neurological damage, family notified of stroke, actual cause, drug toxicity. Subject 89, Jennifer Kingsley, age 54, enrolled without consent, death attributed to existing condition, payment authorized for cremation and record disposal. Rosalie's voice was steady. That's my mother, subject 89, Jennifer Kingsley, hit by a car in London, except the car was driven by someone on your payroll. She was transferred to a facility in Seoul while unconscious, enrolled in an illegal drug trial, and when she died from complications, you paid to erase every trace. Teal's face had gone from pale to gray. 23 patients total, Rosalie continued. 23 people who died in your facilities. 23 families who were lied to. 23 murders covered up with falsified death certificates and cremation orders. She clicked to the next slide. Video footage, grainy but clear. Teal sitting in what looked like a private office, talking to two men in suits. The subtitles translated. The ethics board is asking questions. They need to stop asking questions. You want them removed. I want them convinced, or replaced, I don't care which. More footage, different meetings, different people, same message. Pay whoever needs to be paid. Make the problems disappear. Keep the money flowing. A reporter in the back shouted, Mr. Gwon, is this real? Teal gripped the edge of the table. This is fabricated, deepfakes, doctored evidence. She's been mentally unstable since you had me committed to a psychiatric facility and tried to have me killed. Rosalie's voice cut through his. I have medical records from that too, showing drugs I was given without consent, a psychiatric diagnosis written before I was even evaluated, and testimony from 3 nurses who were paid to sedate me whenever I asked questions. She turned to face the room. Gwon Teal murdered my mother. He built an empire on illegal medical experiments. He bribed government officials. He falsified patient records. He killed anyone who got too close to the truth. And when I found out, he tried to kill me too. The silence was suffocating. Then someone in the room said, "Call the police." The doors burst open. Singapore police flooded in. Behind them, officers from Interpol. The room erupted into chaos. Investors were shouting. Board members scrambling for exits. Stock prices were already collapsing in real time on people's phones, down 20%, 30, 40. Someone yelled about lawsuits. Someone else about criminal liability. Teal stood frozen at the head of the table. A police inspector approached him. Gwon Teal, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and suspicion of multiple counts of murder. You have the right to remain silent. This is a mistake, Teal said. His voice was calm, too calm. I have diplomatic immunity, connections, you can't. Your connections can't help you here, the inspector said. Singapore doesn't play those games, and Interpol has been building a case for months. Rosalie watched as they moved toward him with handcuffs. Teal's eyes found hers across the chaos. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw something real in his face. Panic. Rosalie, he started. Don't, she said. But he kept talking as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Wait, please, just give me 5 minutes alone. The inspector looked at Rosalie. It's your choice, Mrs. Gwon. She almost said no. But she'd come this far. She could give him 5 minutes. Clear the room, she said. The room emptied. Police waited outside the doors. Rosalie and Teal stood 15 feet apart. He was still handcuffed. She was still wearing white. You ruined me, he said quietly. You murdered my mother. I made a business decision that had unfortunate consequences. I didn't set out to hurt anyone. Rosalie's laugh was sharp. You enrolled her in an illegal drug trial without her consent. You falsified her medical records. You paid to have her cremated before anyone could ask questions. That's not an unfortunate consequence. That's premeditated murder. Teal's jaw tightened. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The board, the investors. Project Swan was supposed to revolutionize neurological medicine. We were so close to a breakthrough. A few complications were. Complications, she was my mother. She was terminal anyway, the cancer. She didn't have cancer, Rosalie's voice cracked. You made that up. Her medical records were clean. You targeted her because she was alone. Foreign, no family in Korea, easy to make disappear. Teal said nothing. You targeted me for the same reason, Rosalie continued. Foreign, alone, easy to control. You thought I'd be grateful enough to stay quiet, weak enough to never question you. You saw me as another complication you could manage. That's not true. Then why did you marry me? Because, he stopped, drew a breath. Because I needed someone I could control, someone who wouldn't interfere, and yes, at first that's all you were. At first. Something shifted in his face. You were supposed to be temporary, a convenience, but he looked at her. You were smarter than I expected, stronger. You played the role so perfectly I almost believed it. And when I realized you were awake those nights, listening to everything, I was impressed. You tried to kill me. I tried to contain you. There's a difference. Rosalie stared at him. No, there isn't. I never wanted to hurt you, Rosalie. Not really. I just needed you to stop digging. If you just accepted the life I gave you, the money, the comfort, the security. You mean the cage? I mean the protection. From people far more dangerous than me. His voice dropped. You think I'm the monster in this story, but I kept you safe from the real monsters, the people who funded Project Swan, the government officials who wanted you silenced permanently. I convinced them you were harmless, that I had you under control. If I hadn't, you'd have disappeared before you even found that hospital bill. Rosalie felt something cold settle in her chest. You're saying you protected me. I'm saying I kept you alive longer than anyone else would have. By planning my suicide. By giving you a clean exit that wouldn't raise questions. You'd have been sedated, painless, quick, better than what they wanted to do to you. Rosalie took a step closer. You think that makes you noble, that you chose a gentler method of murder. I think it makes me realistic. I know what I am. I've never pretended otherwise. He looked at her. But you pretended to be weak, grateful, innocent. You lied just as much as I did. I lied to survive. You lied to kill. And yet here we are, both liars, both playing roles. The only difference is you wrote the better ending. Rosalie felt tears burning her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were rage. I didn't come here for your confession, she said, or your excuses. I came here to destroy you. I know. Because you killed my mother. I know. And you don't even feel sorry. Teal looked at her for a long moment, then said something she didn't expect. I do feel sorry that I didn't see you coming sooner. The door opened, the inspector stepped in. Time's up. They pulled Teal toward the exit. He didn't fight, just looked back at Rosalie one last time. Was any of it real, he asked. The marriage, the wedding night, any of it. Rosalie met his eyes. I married you to destroy you, she said clearly. From the very beginning, every smile, every kiss, every moment I pretended to be your grateful foreign wife, it was all part of the plan. I changed my name, buried my history, made myself exactly what you'd want, and you fell for it. Teal's face crumpled. So no, Rosalie continued. None of it was real. You were just a target, and I spent 3 years learning everything about you so I could take everything from you. 3 years before we married. I started investigating you the day my mother died. It took me 6 months to track the money to Seoul, another year to build a false identity, 6 more months to position myself where you'd notice me, the charity gala, the stumble, the whole meet cute was choreographed. Teal stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're just like me, he whispered. No, Rosalie said. I'm worse, because you hurt people for profit, I hurt you for love. They dragged him toward the door. His composure finally broke. Rosalie, please, I can fix this. I have money, connections. I can make this go away. Just tell them you lied. Tell them the evidence was faked. I'll do anything." "Anything?" Rosalie's voice was cold. "Then bring my mother back." Teal went silent. "That's what I thought," she said. They pulled Teal through the doors. Camera flashes exploded, reporters screaming questions. "Mr. Gwon, did you murder your wife's mother? Is Project Swan a criminal operation? How many people died in your facilities?" Teal's face was blank now, empty, like someone had unplugged him. Then he saw something on a reporter's phone screen. The stock price, his company's value collapsing in real time, down 70%, trading halted, board members resigning, partners severing contracts. Everything he'd built, gone. His legs buckled. They caught him before he fell. And that's when he screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw, broken. The sound of a man watching his entire world burn while the woman he'd tried to kill stood in the ashes holding the match. Rosalie watched through the glass doors as they dragged him away. She didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just stood there in her white suit, surrounded by investors and cameras and the wreckage of a billionaire's empire. And felt absolutely nothing. The inspector approached her. "Mrs. Gwon, or should I say Ms. Armitage? Rosalie is fine. We'll need your full testimony. It could take weeks." "I have time. And the evidence, all of it's authentic. Every word, every file, every recording." She looked at him. "You'll find bodies if you dig deep enough, real ones, in facilities across Asia. My mother's just the one I could prove." The inspector nodded grimly. "We'll find them." Rosalie walked out of the conference room into the Singapore morning. The sun was bright, the air was warm. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. It rang 3 times. Then Rosalie. Her father's voice. She hadn't heard it in 3 years. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice cracked. "I did it, I got him." Silence on the other end, then a sound that might have been a sob. "Your mother would be proud," Marcus Armitage said. Rosalie closed her eyes. "I hope so." She hung up. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself breathe. Because the man who killed her mother was finally going to pay. And the woman who'd pretended to sleep while planning his destruction could finally rest. The trial lasted 6 months. Not because the evidence was complicated. It wasn't. Rosalie had handed prosecutors a road map to every crime Gwon Teal had committed in the last decade. It lasted 6 months because there were 23 victims, 23 families, 23 lives that needed to be accounted for in court. Rosalie attended every day of testimony. She sat in the gallery wearing dark colors, hands folded in her lap, watching as forensic accountants explained money trails, as medical experts detailed how experimental drugs killed patients who'd never consented to treatment, as government officials testified about bribes they'd accepted and investigations they'd buried. Teal's defense team tried everything. They argued the recordings were inadmissible, that Rosalie had obtained them illegally, that she'd entrapped him, that she was mentally unstable and seeking revenge for a marriage that failed. The judge wasn't impressed. The defendant's wife may have recorded him without permission, Judge Lim said during one hearing, but he confessed to murder on those recordings. The method of discovery doesn't erase the confession. They tried character assassination next. Brought up Rosalie's false identity, her deception, the fact that she'd planned from the beginning to destroy her husband. Her lawyer, a woman named Sarah Tan who specialized in international criminal cases, handled it calmly. "My client entered a legal marriage under a false identity because she was investigating her mother's murder," Sarah said. "Everything she did was in pursuit of justice. Everything Mr. Gwon did was in pursuit of profit at the cost of human lives. The court can decide which deserves punishment. The jury decided in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Murder, conspiracy, medical fraud, bribery, human trafficking, falsifying death certificates, 23 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The sentencing hearing was held on a Tuesday in March. Rosalie sat in the front row as Judge Lim read the verdict. Kwon Tae-il, you have been found guilty of crimes that demonstrate a complete disregard for human life and dignity. You used your wealth and influence to exploit vulnerable people. You silenced those who questioned you. You treated human beings as test subjects and disposed of them when they became inconvenient. Tae-il stood motionless beside his lawyers. He looked thinner than he had 6 months ago, hollow, like something had been carved out of him. For the murder of Jennifer Kingsley and 22 other victims, for conspiracy to commit fraud, and for your role in an international criminal enterprise, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Families crying, reporters typing frantically, cameras flashing. Rosalie just sat there. She didn't cry, didn't cheer, didn't feel the surge of victory she'd expected. She just felt tired. Additionally, Judge Lim continued, all assets belonging to Kwon Tae-il and his associated companies are hereby seized. They will be liquidated to provide restitution to the families of victims and to fund ongoing investigations into similar criminal operations. Billions of dollars gone. The empire Tae-il had built was being dismantled piece by piece. His company dissolved, his properties sold, his name erased from buildings and foundations and awards. It was over. As they led Tae-il out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he looked at Rosalie one last time. She met his eyes. He mouthed something. She couldn't hear it over the noise, but she could read his lips. I'm sorry. Rosalie looked away. Because sorry didn't bring her mother back. The media coverage was relentless. For weeks, Rosalie's face was on every news channel. The wife who faked her death to catch a killer. Billionaire's downfall orchestrated by grieving daughter. How one woman brought down a medical empire. Interview requests flooded in. Book deals, movie offers. Everyone wanted her story. Rosalie ignored most of them. But there was one interview she agreed to. BBC's Sarah Montague sat across from her in a quiet studio in London. No audience, just 2 women and a camera. Why did you agree to this interview? Sarah asked. Because people need to understand what happened, Rosalie said. Not the sensational parts, the real parts, about how wealthy men can buy silence, how systems protect power instead of people, how my mother died because she was nobody to them. Your husband's defense team claimed you entrapped him, that you were mentally unstable, that this was about a failed marriage, not justice. Rosalie's expression didn't change. My husband murdered my mother, then he tried to murder me. Those are facts. What I did to expose him, changing my identity, marrying him under false pretenses, recording his confessions, those were tactics. Desperate tactics by someone who knew the system wouldn't help her otherwise. Do you regret any of it? I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it. There are people who say you're just as manipulative as he was, that you lied and deceived and became exactly the kind of person you were fighting against. Rosalie paused. Maybe I did. Maybe you can't fight monsters without becoming something monstrous yourself. But the difference is I did it to save lives. He did it to make money. That distinction matters to me. What do you want people to take away from your story? That if something feels wrong, it probably is. That institutions fail people every day. That sometimes justice requires you to do illegal, uncomfortable, dangerous things. And that women, particularly foreign women, women of color, women without power, are dismissed and silenced until they force the world to listen. The interview aired on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, It had 17 million views. The response was split. Half the comments called her a hero, the other half called her a sociopath. Rosalie didn't read any of them. She had work to do. The Kingsley Foundation launched 6 months after the trial ended. It was funded by a portion of the seized assets from Teal's estate. Millions of dollars that had once paid for illegal medical experiments were now paying for victim advocacy. The foundation's mission was simple: support women who'd been silenced by powerful men. They provided legal representation for women fighting corporate retaliation, funded investigations into suspicious medical facilities, created safe houses for whistleblowers, offered financial support to families who'd lost loved ones to medical negligence. Rosalie ran it from a small office in London, but the reach was international. Within the first year, they'd helped 43 women come forward with evidence against their abusers. They'd shut down 2 illegal medical clinics. They'd provided therapy and financial assistance to families in 8 countries. The work was exhausting. Every day brought new stories. New women who'd been hurt, new systems that had failed them. But it was also healing. Because every woman they helped was someone who didn't have to marry a monster to get justice. One afternoon, a woman walked into the foundation's office. She was Korean, mid-30s, nervous. "I saw your interview," she said to Rosalie, "about Project Swan." Rosalie set down her coffee. "Okay. My sister died in one of those facilities. They told us it was a stroke, but she was healthy. She'd gone in for a routine medical study, extra money for college. They said it was safe." Rosalie's chest tightened. What was her name? Minjai. She was 22. "I'm sorry." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "They cremated her before we could ask questions, told us it was protocol. We didn't know we could say no. We didn't know we had rights. We trusted them." Rosalie stood and walked around the desk. "You have rights now. Tell me everything. We'll open an investigation." The woman looked at her. "Why are you doing this? You already got justice for your mother. Why keep fighting?" Rosalie thought about that for a moment. "Because it wasn't just about my mother," she said finally. "It was about every woman who trusted a system that failed her, every family that was lied to, every person who died because someone valued profit over human life. I can't bring any of them back, but I can make sure the next person has a chance." The woman nodded, then she started talking. And Rosalie listened. Rosalie didn't plan to visit him. For 2 years, she avoided even thinking about Gwon Teal. She focused on the foundation, on helping other women, on building a life that wasn't defined by what he'd done to her. But there were nights when she still couldn't sleep, when she'd lie in bed and hear his voice in her head saying things he'd actually said, things he might have said, things she wished she'd said back. Her therapist suggested closure. "You spent 3 years pretending to be asleep while planning his destruction," Dr. Reeves said during a session. "And now you're spending your nights replaying conversations with a ghost. Maybe you need to actually speak to him. Not for him, for you." So, on a cold morning in November, Rosalie drove to Changi Prison in Singapore. The visiting room was sterile. White walls, plastic chairs, thick glass separating inmates from visitors. Teal was already sitting there when she arrived. He looked older, grayer. His prison uniform hung loose on a frame that used to be imposing. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Rosalie picked up hers. "Hi," he said. "Hi." Silence. "I didn't think you'd come," Teal said finally. "I almost didn't." "What changed your mind?" Rosalie looked at him. "I needed to see if you were real, or if I'd built you up into something bigger in my head than you actually were. And you're smaller than I remembered." Something flickered in his eyes, pain maybe, or just recognition. "I've had a lot of time to think," he said. About what I did, who I was, the people I hurt. Are you sorry? Would it matter if I was? No. Teal nodded. Then I won't insult you with an apology I can't take back. Your mother is still dead. 22 other people are still dead. Saying sorry doesn't change that. So why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know that I understand what I did. That I'm not sitting here believing I was justified or misunderstood. I know exactly what I was. A man who valued success over human life. Who convinced himself that ends justified means. Who treated people like problems to be solved instead of lives to be valued. Rosalie felt something loosen in her chest. You're right, that is what you were. You destroyed me, Teal said quietly. Took everything, my company, my reputation, my freedom, my future. Yes. And I earned it. Rosalie stared at him. That's it, no begging for forgiveness, no claiming you're a changed man. Would you believe me if I did? No. Then what's the point? He leaned back. You won, Rosalie, completely. You spent 3 years becoming exactly what you needed to become to take me down. You were brilliant, ruthless, perfect, everything I never saw coming. Don't make me sound noble. I lied and manipulated and used you just like you used my mother. I know that's why you won. You became just like me, except you had a better reason. Rosalie set the phone down. Picked it back up. I didn't come here for you to tell me I was right, she said. I came here because I needed to know if any of it was real, if you actually felt anything, or if you're just empty inside. Teal looked at her for a long moment. I loved the version of you I thought existed, he said finally. The grateful foreign wife who needed me, who looked at me like I'd saved her. That version made me feel human. Made me feel like maybe I wasn't just a machine calculating profit margins. That version never existed. I know, but for a few months I believed she did, and that belief was the closest I've come to love in my entire life. He paused. So yes, some of it was real, at least to me. Rosalie stood up. I hope prison is exactly as terrible as you deserve, she said. Teal nodded. It is. She hung up the phone and walked out. And she never looked back. 2 years later, Rosalie bought an apartment in London. Not a penthouse, just a regular flat in Bloomsbury with old radiators and creaky floors. The bedroom window looked out at a street with actual trees instead of a city skyline. It was small, warm, hers. She'd furnished it herself. No decorators, no stylists, just things she actually liked. A blue sofa, bookshelves filled with mysteries and biographies, photos of her mother on the mantel. The foundation was thriving. They'd expanded to 12 countries, helped hundreds of women, shut down 6 facilities that were conducting illegal trials. Rosalie had testified before international courts, spoken at universities, been interviewed by journalists who actually wanted to understand the work instead of sensationalize the story. She'd started dating again, nothing serious, just dinners and conversations and the slow process of learning to trust people. Her therapist said she was making progress. You're sleeping better, Dr. Reeves noted during a session. Rosalie nodded. I am. How long has it been since you had the nightmare? 3 weeks. The nightmare was always the same. Lying in bed at 11:47 p.m., Teal's voice in the closet, her mother's face, the feeling of being trapped in her own body. But it was fading. On a Wednesday night in March, exactly 5 years after her mother died, Rosalie came home from the foundation office. She made tea, changed into comfortable clothes, sat on the sofa and read for an hour. At 11:30 p.m., she turned off the lights and got into bed. The room was dark, quiet, safe. Her phone sat on the nightstand, fully charged, no hidden recordings. No evidence to gather. Just a phone. Rosalie lay on her side and closed her eyes. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't practice her breathing technique, didn't count backward, didn't listen for footsteps or voices or secrets whispered in the dark. She just let herself drift. And somewhere around 11:47 p.m., Rosalie Armitage Kingsley fell into real sleep. Deep, dreamless, peaceful. Because the man who destroyed lives in the dark would never again watch someone pretend to sleep.
5 years from plotting to sleeping. That's the timeline of revenge. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. Did she win? Or did she just trade one kind of insomnia for another? Velara Stories is where we ask the uncomfortable questions after the credits roll. Was this justice or just expensive therapy? You tell me.